Thanks for tuning in to the World XP podcast. If you're enjoying the content, please drop us up, drop a like, and let us know your thoughts below in the comments. Also, please consider supporting our podcast via the link below. It really helps us out. Becca, welcome to the World XP podcast. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. So we're going to start with the question from the previous guest, and then we'll do a little bit of an intro, and then we'll jump right into it. I'm super excited for this sneak preview to those who are going to stick around for longer than 2 minutes. Becca does crime scene stuff, so that's pretty cool. So if you've seen any of those shows, kind of, maybe not so similar, but kind of like it. All right, the question from the last guest is, how do you deal with rejection or failure? Do you have specific coping mechanisms that you use, or are you an everything happens for a reason type of person, or how do you deal with that sort of thing?
Man, that's a good one. I am very hard on myself. Yeah, whoo, that's a good one. I think I definitely am not an everything happens for a reason. I try to be. My mom always tells me that. But I really dwell on things. I guess my biggest like coping mechanism is like working out, whether that's in the gym or like we met playing soccer. I feel like soccer is a huge mental outlet for me because I'm so focused on what's going on in the field that I can't even think about what I came mad about. So for me, I definitely would say like working out is a big stress reliever when I'm having a bad day or any problems arise.
Yeah, that makes total sense. One thing that question, or at least the everything happens for a reason mentality that I figure out is like it's easier to let go of things that are outside of your control. Um, and that kind of helps, just like it's like, all right, done, off to the next thing, and we move. All right. Who are you and what do you do?
Well, my name is Rebecca Robinson. I go by Becca, and I am a crime scene specialist in DC. It's crazy to me, but August, I just hit 10 years in the forensic field, which I don't feel like I have been in it that long. I feel like I literally just moved here. Started in Virginia 2013, fresh out of graduating college, in a fingerprinting job, and stayed in the area ever since. It's like I said, I don't even believe it's been 10 years. But yeah, currently in crime scene investigation. It is pretty cool because of the CSI Las Vegas. That's actually how I got into it. My parents were like obsessed with the show, so I'd watch it with them. And then I actually found a college right around my house that offered that degree. So I was like, all right, let's give it a go. And here I am 10 years later. So it's been great.
So what do you, well, I guess you answered some of the questions, but when you go to school, is it criminal justice, or is it a different, like a forensic degree, or is it a sciencey type thing, or how do you decide that? And I guess all the kind of building blocks fell into place. A lot of the questions that I ask for people who are in sorts of fields that are not like your typical ones are, how did you get exposed to it in the first place, which you answered already, and then how did you get the training, the necessary training that you needed to kind of to jump into it, which obviously was your school. But how did you go, like, was it an easy path for you, or was there a lot of searching around for various trainings or certificates or degrees, or how did that work?
Yeah, so I actually got really lucky. It was I think the last semester of my junior year, my high school actually offered a class in forensics. And I was like, I wonder what this is like. And I absolutely loved it. And my mom just, I think she just Googled it and found one probably like an hour and a half away. So I went for like a crime scene night, is what they called it. And fell in love with the school. It was D3. They offered me soccer as well. So it was like a good 2-for-1. I got school and soccer. My specific degree, I got very lucky. Sorry, literally, he does want nothing to do with me all day. As soon as I pull out a laptop, he's obsessed.
That's okay, it
Um,
happens.
I got very lucky that my college, my degree is forensic science / crime scene investigation. Each college is a little bit different. I know a lot of my colleagues and friends, they had to either do like a forensic route, but pick bio or chem, and kind of take classes that had to do with those. And I got very lucky where I didn't have to do it because we were crime scene investigators. So like all of my sciencey class were like my math was blood spatter, and like hit and runs, like tire mark reactions. So I got very lucky that I didn't have to take any classes that I didn't think were going to be useful to my degree. Um, and I think it was just all opportunity. Like I was literally in line at my college graduation, and this girl was like talking to me and my other friend who were classmates of her, and she's like, "Hey, I just got this job in Virginia. They're doing a mass hire. It's for fingerprinting. You guys should apply." I think I had maybe a 30 or 45-minute phone interview, and I was hired right away. This area in particular, I like to call it a hub. There's just so many federal agencies, so many state, county, all these different agencies. Whether you're in Virginia, Maryland, or DC, it's a lot of opportunity. So yeah, once I moved here and started the jobs here, I was able to kind of transition pretty easily into other jobs. My biggest recommendation would kind of be like look into the different fields because forensics is a very broad thing. Like I said, I'm in crime scene investigation. There's also fingerprint examiners, firearm examiners, chemistry, which either deals with drugs or sometimes like urine analysis. There's digital. There's so many different entities, and some of them may require more schooling. Mine, I was lucky I just needed my 4-year bachelor's, but I know some of my friends went on to their masters, and some agencies you need that, some agencies you don't. Um, Once I started at my first crime scene job, they actually got me my certification. It's called the IEI, it's the International Association of Identification, and they offered a crime scene certification. And that's really helped me because my current job, they actually wanted it for me to get hired. So I definitely fully support people looking into what their agency is willing to pay for. Like my agency right now, and many agencies also will help you go back to school. So, like I said, I only have a bachelor's, but if I ever wanted a master's, I get money to go back to school. Some agencies are really, really into training and helping you get those certificates. And like I said, just do your research and know like kind of what you want to get into because everything's a little bit different. I was, like I said, very lucky. I'm only 4 years of school and I'm in crime scene. So
Yeah. So what are the different forensic sort of fields? Because I think I had some neighbors that were in more of the like, I don't know, dead body forensic stuff. And then there's the photography, and then like you mentioned, all the like the chemical side of things and all the various sorts of things. Well, how would you get into or I guess try the different types of fields, right? You mentioned how your path was kind of the cards just laid themselves out for you in a nice way. But if they didn't, what would the process be for trying different things, or if you want to go fingerprinting or photography or any of the other things, how would you go about doing that?
yeah, I would definitely say try internships. I like went to a very, very small school, so I unfortunately did not get an internship, and I was actually really scared that it was going to hinder the beginning of my career. So I got lucky that I didn't need one. But another really great resource is ride-alongs. Like you can just reach out to these agencies and be like, "Hey, I'm interested in so and so. Do you have that type of field at your office? If so, could I come shadow for a day? Like if it's a lab position or you know, in DC, we do ride alongs. So you could come ride along for a crime scene. We can't promise you'll get one because we can't plan out the crime, but even just showing your enthusiasm in the field and like you're trying your best to get any resources that you can, it really shows a lot. I'm a big thing that I found was crimesceneinvestigator.net. It's a website that just kind of links everything together and it has different fields. So I started my career in DC in the evidence unit. So, excuse me, if the other crime scene people or officers had to grab evidence from scene and then bring it back to the building, that was what I dealt with. Or there was outside agencies that would come in and we had them test fire. Sorry. So my first job was just in evidence, like the property room. So you kind of see them on TV. It's like, just looks like a cage with all these boxes. And I feel like that's a really good representation. And then I worked my way into crime scene. But that website has like crime scene jobs, supervisor jobs, internships. It has a lot out there. all in one spot. So all over the
Mm,
country, different agencies post their stuff there, and it's just a great resource to have.
that makes
But
sense.
yeah, there's a lot of fields. Like I said, I started out in fingerprinting, so I was in a lab 10 hours a day just using different chemicals, fingerprinting different objects. You can get into that. There's firearms, which deals with like test firing the guns, which serve two purposes. You want to be able to tell the operability of the firearm. And then it's this really interesting thing that you can connect a known firearm to an unknown casing by the impression that it leaves on the back of the head stamp. So there's one for the firing pin and one for the ejection port. And it's a very unique pattern that can be linked back to that gun. You can also do, like you see on TV, like the microscope, the comparing two different bullets. That's more like the striation pattern of the bullet firing from the gun. Um, Digital, so you can do breaking into laptops, cell phones. You can even do like security cameras for like if there was a break-in, a robbery, or burglary. What else?
Let's talk about the fingerprinting stuff because I feel like that's one that most people would have seen on TV before, um, or have some reference to it. So when you say there's different chemicals in the lab, so what is the process of, okay, you find fingerprint at a scene and then what? Right? We see in various TV shows, right? We saw in uh the National Treasure where he
Yeah.
gets like the little thing to get the lady's thumbprint and scan it into the thing in other TV shows where they have like powder and all this other stuff. So how does it actually work, or what are some of the processes that you guys use to gather that, and then I guess what do you do in the lab with it aside from, well, I don't know. Is there a longer process to like to actually match it, or how does that work?
Yeah. So each agency is going to be a little bit different. Depends on your budget, depends on like your SOPs, which is your standard operating procedures, is what type of chemicals you're going to have and what chemicals you're going to use, whether you're going to do it on scene or bring it back into the lab. Excuse me. I feel like every CSI person, we have black powder, and that is our like go-to. We use it for everything. Um, a lot on like smoother objects. So let's just say I had a car broken into. I'm going to get in the car and look at it. My first thought process is going to be, okay, if I was getting into this car, what would I touch? If I was driving it, what would I touch? How would I go about being inside this car? And then I'm going to, again, look at rough versus smooth surfaces. So, smooth surfaces like the the glass on your cell phone, if you just like touch it, you can see it. It's a really pretty print. That's what I mean by smooth surfaces. So inside of a car, depending on the type of radio you have, if you have a touch screen, your windows, obviously, if you pull down your vanity mirror, those are all the rear view mirror. Those are all great spots for fingerprints. So that's where I'm probably going to search first. And yeah, we just have black powder. There's different kind of brushes. I prefer a feather brush. But yeah, you just kind of like twirl it, go around the print, and you're trying to just have the dust adhere to the print on the object. And then it's kind of just like clear tape. They call them all these fancy names for crime scene, but yeah, it's just clear tape, and then you put it on there, and then you put it on a backing, which is kind of just like an index card. You use contrasting colors. So if I'm using black powder, I'll use a white background. If I'm using white powder, I'll use a black background. Um, as for the like comparison part, that is not us. So we will do all the finding of the fingerprints, and then we send them away to an examiner, which, like I said, is more of like the latent fingerprint unit. So they're the ones that actually do the comparison, and that is a whole other certification. And like, I know sometimes it could take up to like 18 months for that certification. It's very specialized and very unique, and it takes a lot. Usually, if we're in a car and we have the owner, we'll also get their fingerprints. So it's easier to compare the ones that we found to theirs, and we can quickly eliminate them. Because again, we're trying to find the bad guy in the car, not the owner. Um,
Yeah.
Now, if it's like bigger objects or, like water bottles or cardboard or letters, receipts, we can bring those back to the lab and use chemicals on them. Each chemical does a little bit different. We have porous versus non porous. So, porous is like papery stuff, so things that absorb moisture. Non porous are things that don't absorb moisture. So, examples of porous, like I said, would be like receipts. So, let's say the car got stolen on the 5th and there's a receipt from the 6th. That's most likely going to be from the suspect. So, we can fingerprint that paper. Obviously, we might get the person that worked at the restaurant, but it's always great because you have to receive it once you're in like a drive through. So we have chemicals that can deal with paper, and it's basically reacting with the sweat glands in your finger on the paper. Um, Non-absorbing materials, non-porous, like I said, kind of like chip bags or like water bottles. Those are my favorite to process because we have something, it's called cyanoacrylate, but it's basically super glue. So you'll put the item in the chamber and you'll add liquid super glue to a fuming, basically like a hot plate. And when it heats up, the vapors go into the air and stick to the fingerprint on the object. And then it'll leave like a white residue, and you can either add black powder or the preferred method is like a dye stain. So these I feel like is what you would see on CSI, like the fluorescent like greens and yellows, like in the lab.
Hmm.
That's real life. It's really cool, and I could nerd out about fingerprints forever. But yeah, it's the chemicals are forever changing and getting better, and they can do really cool stuff and really help us. But like I said, we do all the finding, and then we will send all of our prints out to get examined, and then they can put it into the database, or like I said, compare it to the owner if we know who it is. And then if somebody's been arrested before, we'll have record of their fingerprints, and it can be compared to that.
So if you two follow-ups to that, one is obviously you prefer a nice clean print like on a cell phone screen or whatever, like something like that. But if you don't have one of those, how at what point are they sending you back to go look for a new one, a cleaner one? And then the second follow-up is if they've not been fingerprinted before, then are you just kind of out of luck?
So first question, that's what's really risky about forensics. We're kind of one and done. Most times we don't get to go back. Like, especially if we're doing a search warrant on somebody's residence, you don't have legal access back to that place. So it really is one and done. That's why you have to really go into it very methodically. Like I said, I will always go into something smooth slash rough. So if I'm inside and it's a super rough surface, like kind of like my water bottle has all this texture on it, anything that like has all this texture, that's going to be better for DNA. So I go into it thinking, what can I print? What can I DNA? Sometimes I can do both. Sometimes I can do neither. It's just kind of a crapshoot, and you never know what you're going to get, which is kind of what I like about forensics. I'm never bored. Every day is a new adventure at work. So, yeah, normally it's one and done. So you have to kind of plan it out. So, DNA, super sensitive. So you have to do DNA first because 9 times out of 10, you're not using a new fingerprint brush every single time because that'll get very costly. Um, so you want to do DNA first so that you're not contaminating anything, and then you'll go in with your powder. But again, if you're doing DNA, that's a swiping motion. So if you try to do that on a smooth surface, you could be swiping through a fingerprint. So yeah, it's all based on like your experience. And I always say, like, if you don't know, ask somebody. Like, your colleagues are your best like support system. They may have worked a scene that you've never worked before, and it's two brains are better than one. So I am never too prideful to ask for help because I cannot redo this, and this is somebody's like life in my hands, and I'm not trying to screw that up. So I will always ask for help. Um, and then sorry, what was the second part to that?
If you got a print and that person has never been
Oh yeah, if they're not
fingerprinted
in the
before.
system.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, if they're not in the system, you're kind of not out of luck, but kind of in like a holding pattern. You're kind of hoping that they'll eventually get put into the system because what's nice is those unknowns we can keep them. So it may pop up like 5 years later. So you might not get the person right away, but if they end up getting committed for a crime in the future, you can link it back. So it can be a little frustrating. Um, but I try not to think of not being able to get the person. Like I'm just always trying to help the victim in any way that I can. Um, and I don't like to let those small obstacles like weigh in on, oh, I'm not going to get the guy, so why am I going to do this? You
No,
know?
of course. I mean, you have other means to identify or whatever. But
Yeah, and DNA is like slowly gaining speed. So DNA has been really great as well.
so that leads me to a question that I've thought about. Well, there's two parts to this question. The first is I was talking with somebody the other day. It was like an old we were talking about an old crime show back like in the 18 whatever. I was like, how did anyone get caught ever? Um,
I know.
and then the second part is it gets into that like personal um liberty maybe is not the right word, but like at what point like you as the agency that's going to investigate would love if everybody's DNA and everybody's fingerprints were on file. But like as me, a private citizen, I was like, I don't want them to have my stuff because I just like I don't why would that need to be the and then obviously some for like different jobs you have to get it done anyways. But
Yeah.
um like there's a comedian that had a joke about the 23andMe stuff. It's like, oh, everyone's so interested in sending their spit over the internet to some website that you have no idea, and now your DNA is just out there. It's like, yeah, it doesn't seem like the best idea. So
Yeah.
how do you guys deal with that from a I don't know, from you as the day-to-day person thinking, yeah, it'd be really nice if we had everybody's DNA. And then it's like, oh, okay, well maybe not, because that's like a little creepy.
Yeah, it can be super invasive. Luckily, like if you've committed a crime and I'm the one collecting your eliminations, like, or sorry, if a crime has been committed against you and I'm collecting your eliminations for our processing purposes, I'll explain to you, like, we're going to be getting your DNA and prints. It can only be used for this case. So I'm not sure if every agency is the same way, but like the last two agencies I've worked for, we don't just get to like keep your DNA forever and do whatever we want with it and put it into every system possible. We can only use it for comparison purposes for the evidence we have at hand. But yeah, those 23andMe, it's very funny because I think that's how, is it the Golden State Killer? I think
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
a familiar. Yeah, it's, you don't realize how much is in that small print and what they can use your stuff for. So yeah, there's been several people being caught with those ancestry genealogy kits right now for crimes. So yeah, it's hard because yeah, wouldn't we love to have everybody's everything? Yeah, but also it is like a privacy matter. So um, luckily, like where I work, I feel like it's repeat offenders. So like we probably already have your stuff. But yeah, for smaller agencies and I can't even like even the early 90s, like I can't even imagine how did they catch anybody? Like their CCTV was probably horrible. DNA was not very new. Fingerprints was barely used. Like I don't know how they caught people. Which is why I think the personal opinion, the Innocence Project probably took off so highly because there were so many wrongful convictions that they were just like badgering people into just saying, "Yeah, I did it," because they just wanted to be done with the questioning. Yeah, I think it was hard. We're very lucky that technology and things keep changing, and it's for our favor because it's definitely helping our job and really helping us catch the people that did these bad things. So we're very lucky. Yeah,
Yeah. On the flip side to that now, I watch a show like Bones and I'm like, how does anyone get away with anything now?
it's crazy. Like it's not to like give people tips, but when we watch like whether it's like a Ring doorbell or the grocery cam, and people aren't wearing gloves. Just something as simple as wearing gloves while committing a crime. I'm like,
I
people
don't
just
I don't think that's you giving a tip. I think that's in every like crime novel
right.
ever.
I'm like, just put on some gloves. Like that's the first thing I'm looking for is fingerprints. If you're wearing gloves, I can't get anything. It's crazy. Yeah. Like I said, technology is forever changing and people are always trying to find new technology. Like I know I'm in like a I forget what it's called, but like a council for this DMV area of different agencies. And I know the biggest thing that like we keep getting presented in these meetings is ways to get like DNA off bullets. So like when you're loading them into the firearm, DNA and fingerprints is still kind of difficult to get off those things. So there's forever people trying to make that a higher success rate. So yeah, like 2023, things are just increasing for the forensic field, and we're just finding better ways to do things. So yeah, it's definitely in the favor of us and not the criminals. And it's like I said, it's fun, and I can talk about all the sciencey fun things that we can do forever. It's
Yeah. So when there's something new that comes out, how like to get it, I guess, test ran. Like for instance, you only have one shot at a scene, but you've got this new piece of gear that you want to try. Have you tested it a bunch beforehand, or is the test run at the scene, or do you do your normal what you would normally do and then try the new thing afterwards to make sure that you get it and then also see if the new thing works? Or how does new stuff get implemented into your repertoire of things?
yeah. Um, For us, particularly at my new agencies, we haven't really used any new technology yet. But like I said, I'm a member and got my certification through the IAI. They have a yearly conference, and at that conference, they have like any other type of conference, like booths set up with different vendors and different products that you can try out. And they also send out, I want to say it's quarterly, might be quarterly. Um, and it's kind of like a book, like a it's not a magazine because it's only like this big, but different tests and trials that people have tried out these like different machines and products. The biggest thing I've noticed is a lot of people just do like fake evidence. It's real items, but not something that they've gotten on a crime scene. So they'll test it out in the lab setting. Um, because yeah, we don't want to mess it up on actual items. Unfortunately, I have not been a part of the, like, I guess it's the procurement process to decide like if this is a product we're actually going to get. Um, because I don't, yeah, I don't really think there's been anything that new or beneficial for my specific agency. Like we have a super glue chamber, but yeah, I don't know how that procurement process went. Maybe in the next 10 years of my career, I'll get into like the procurement process. Right now, I'm just, oh yeah, we have this and I use this. But yeah, it's definitely a lot of like controlled lab settings that you try out these things because yeah, it's too crucial. Like especially if it's like a homicide case, this is
Yeah.
literally life and death, and we're not trying to possibly destroy our only piece of evidence on a testing out a new product. So
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of lab controlled environments.
Remind me, actually, I'm gonna send this to you now before I forget. There was a reel that um popped up on my feed. These guys were playing like live action role play and pretending to do spells or whatever, and the crime scene people got mad because I guess they like blew a glitter bomb on a body or something like that.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
the body is very important evidence.
Let me see if I can find this because I'll forget otherwise. But you mentioned in the next 10, oh, here it is. You mentioned in the next 10 years of your career. So in the crime shows or whatever, there's always the like hotshot detective or whatever, and then there's the lab people and the like what's next? Like what would be the career progression for you? Like do you want to get into the investigation side, or are you more of a lab type person, or where like what well, I guess what are the career paths within your industry, and then which one is the one that you are on and or aiming for?
Okay. So TV wise, it's typically like real life is like three roles. You're either a lab, a street, or an investigator. So the lab people, they're the ones that do like the comparison and all of the identification. The street, that's like what I'm currently doing. So I'm just like the collector. I'm going out, and my job is to document the scene and so I can bring it to court and then collect everything so that the lab people can have it. And then between me and the lab, that information gets sent to the detective. Um, Typically, very common for this area, in order to be a detective, you have to be a police officer first. So that's a big thing I probably should have mentioned at the beginning. I am not a police officer. Um, Depending on the agency, some of them still are in a police crime scene role. It's slowly shifting where it's civilians doing crime scene and police officers doing police work. Um, when I worked
I
there,
feel like that makes sense.
yeah, so we have the schooling for it. So it was always just like a lateral thing for a police officer. However, crime is getting so bad that we need police officers on the streets policing, that they're kind of picking up like, oh, we have these people that went to school for this. They have the skill set for it. We've taught them how to do it. Let's have them do it. And then the police officers can stay and try and prevent it from even happening.
What
Um,
a concept.
yeah, it's crazy. I know it's like down the East Coast is really popular. I've got friends working in California, the Carolinas, Florida, Texas, Colorado. So it's becoming a lot more popular to have civilians doing crime scene and police officers being police officers. So in that aspect of it, I would never be a detective. I would have to go to a police academy, be a police officer for like, usually it's a minimum of 3 years, and then you can become a detective. Um, and I have no desire to do that. My husband is a detective. He's great at it. I'm proud of him. I don't want to be a police officer. I like my nerdy science field. Um, so yeah, as for where it's going to take me, in the last, gosh, probably 2 years, I've kind of stepped more into like a teaching role. So I'm training a lot of our new people. My agency, we still have some police officers as crime scene. So they come in with zero experience. Like I said, it's like a lateral position. So I'm doing a lot of training of them and trying to make sure they can do what I can do. Um, I wrote a whole training program because we didn't have one for the longest time. So for new employees, um, I just guest lectured at a college the other night, so that was really cool. Um, yeah, I guess like I said, I didn't realize I was already 10 years in. So I'm really enjoying giving back and like teaching. I love talking about my job. I think I even joined this like pen pal for like elementary school kids. Even if I can get one person thinking about the forensic field, um, yeah, it just brings me a lot of joy. So I definitely want to keep teaching, keep trying to do administrative stuff. I also wouldn't mind stepping into like a leadership role. Um, Maybe within like the next 5 years or so, I wouldn't mind being like a supervisor. Um, as for lab, I wouldn't mind if I could do evidence processing for fingerprints. That's like I said, how I started my career. I just use different chemicals in the lab. So I could probably do that again. But my eyes are already so bad that I don't think I could do like the fingerprint comparison, because it's literally just like you're unknown and you think this might be it, and you're just looking at the little pores and like lines on your fingers, but like blown up on a screen for your whole shift, and that's a lot.
That
So yeah,
sounds
I think
horrible.
yeah,
Is there not like software or something that helps with that?
it's getting better, but you still have to be the last like verifier, because you can't just say, yeah, the computer figured it out. Like it needs a human aspect to make sure that you're actually verifying it correctly. So yeah, I think I knew from a very young age that I didn't really want to do much lab stuff. Like I said, being in the field, my job is different every single day. Like I never know what I'm going to come into, whether there's been a car crash, a burglary, a shooting, a stolen car. Like every day is a new adventure. And I think that's what I really like about working in the field. So, yeah, the lab. it is for some people. It wasn't for me. So yeah, if I could continue teaching, maybe supervise soon, but yeah, I do really enjoy field work.
So let's say, all right, call comes in, crime scene is existing. What is the protocol process? What are you gathering? Does it depend on what the crime scene is? Like, what are you bringing with you? And then what are you looking for from, right? Your husband's a detective. So do you have the conversations with those guys, say, hey, um, what would be best if we found for you? Like, do they have things that they're like, hey, if you can find XYZ things that would make our job easier? Or is it no school? Well, it's obviously a depends answer, but or is it more school says we have to go through step one, two, three, four, or is it kind of both?
So we have a radio, just like every police officer does. So we'll either get called over the radio, or sometimes if it's like super weird, we'll get called on the phone. But everyone has their own pre-made crime scene kit. So like in my kit, it's probably, I don't know, like this big. I have my camera, my flash, extra batteries, DNA swabs, sterile water for swabbing, all my fingerprinting stuff, black powder, brushes, tape, backwards. I've got scales. I've got a couple tape measures. My old agency, we had a lot of shootings, and I worked on midnight, so I used it's like chalk, but it's got like reflective specks in it. It's phenomenal for photoing at night because the flash will like hit it and it gets you a good circle. So everyone has their own kit. So I will just grab my kit, um, drive there. I've been very lucky that the two agencies that I worked for doing crime scene, it was a very communicative process. There are some colleagues and people that I've talked to from other agencies that they're like, yeah, sometimes we get on scene and they're like, just do this. And you're like, that's not really a conversation. Um, I like to say you don't know what you don't know, especially when it comes to like newer detectives. They don't know what I know and the types of scenes I've done and what is a typical way to process a scene. So I like to have that two-way conversation. But it all depends on how you go in it. If you go in like, hey, dummy, you don't know what I should do. Why are you trying to talk to me like that? That's not going to go very well either. So I usually try to explain, like, hey, you know, let's talk to the first responding officer because either dispatch has given them information or they've talked to the victim themselves, or maybe they were on scene right before the suspect left. So they're your best first point of contact because they probably have the most case information. So myself and a detective will go and talk to them. And then after that, I'll have a conversation with them like, hey, they saw this person in the front driver door. And on video, before he was in the driver door, he was in the rear driver door. So are you okay with me only processing the front and rear driver side because we have no information to tell us that they were on the passenger side at all? And they more likely will be like, yeah, no problem. But like I said, it's definitely a communication thing, because yeah, not every crime scene is the same, and there are times where you have no information. So if you have a car and it looked like could be two people fled, could be three people fled, we're not really sure. You're processing the whole car, and it's just the way it happens sometimes. But yeah, it's really about communicating. Like I said, I've been very lucky. I could probably count on one hand on over 300 scenes that somebody was difficult and like rude to me or like told me like, no, you're gonna do what I tell you to do. So I've been very lucky that I can have that open communication, and they really trust my experience. I mean, I've worked all different kind of casings, like I said, shootings, homicides, crazy traffic crashes. So I kind of let my experience talk for myself, and they're usually pretty open to have that conversation on what we think we should be
Are
doing.
you ever under a super big time crunch? Like sometimes you see on or you hear about like if the crime just happened and there's an officer that happened to be right there, or are you ever under like a big time crunch, or for you guys in your side of things, you are just kind of business as usual to get every piece of things that you can find, even
The
if like
only
by the
I feel
time
like
you get there, kind of the action is subsided a little bit.
yeah, I like to call ourselves last responders. We are there when everything's safe and has ended. Like we are not police officers. We are last responders. I feel like the only time crunch I think I've really ever been given is on a traffic accident. Like we had shut down 295 going towards like in DC going towards Maryland at like 3 a.m. for a traffic crash that ended in a fatality, which is very serious. So we have to do our due diligence, but also it was a Saturday morning and everyone's going to be needing that road. Um, I would say that's the only time I really get a time crunch is on traffic accidents where we're shutting down main roads. Like I've had to shut down it's either Independence or Pennsylvania Ave, like rush hour in the morning. It's that's the only time people are like,
So
"What the
much
heck? We
power.
have places to go." Yeah, yeah. At my old agency when I was working homicides, I don't think I was ever given a time crunch. Like that is the most severe of crimes, and people want me to take my time because if I don't, then I'm making a mistake, and that's their evidence in their case that gets messed up. I was very lucky that yeah, the homicide detectives very patient. They knew my role was just as important as theirs, and they needed my stuff to be able to do theirs. So yeah, I would say the only time is really traffic accidents that are shutting down major roads. I've been pretty lucky that I haven't really been rushed.
Yeah.
We do get asked that, like, how long do you think you're going to take? I hate that question. I hate that question so much, especially when processing a car because most fingerprints aren't visible to the naked eye. It's not until you put black powder on it that you know how many fingerprints. Sometimes there's one or two, sometimes there's 50. And to do 50 lifts
And
is very tough.
you have to get all 50.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I
So
mean,
that is the
it
one
makes sense.
question I think every CSI hates is how long do you think you're going to take? Are you almost done? I don't know. We'll see.
Oh, that's wild. So I would imagine that you've seen some pretty gnarly stuff uh in all of your scenes. Is it difficult to deal with, or was like the first time you saw something crazy, you couldn't sleep that night, or like are you kind of numb to it at this point? How did that work from the mental side? Did you ever have the I don't want to see that again, I don't want to do this anymore, or was it like where were you at mentally throughout the process of like the first gnarly one to traffic accidents and all sorts of different things? I imagine some not that like injured or dead humans is ever a good thing, but I imagine that there's
Yeah.
some that are maybe a little bit less gross than others.
I feel like everybody's a little bit different. Growing up, my dad's cousin was a volunteer firefighter. And so he would work the weekends and get like these gnarly scenes, most times involving traffic accidents. And he would like show me some photos. And I just remember from a very young age being like, oh my gosh, show me more. Um,
You're a psycho.
yeah, yeah, I feel like some of us really are. So like my old team at my old agency where I did work homicides, we would have a saying that if you don't laugh, you'll cry. Like there's sometimes we just have to find humor in our day. And it's not necessarily humor about the scene or like the person that died, just something to keep us going. Because yeah, it can get really dark and really twisted sometimes. Um, I've been very lucky. I only had one child fatality that was probably my hardest scene to date in 10 years. I was really out of whack for about a week. I remember being on scene and it like not really hitting. Like I did everything, collected the evidence, worked with the detectives. Luckily, my supervisor at the time, she took those very seriously. So she came out with us because the supervisor doesn't have to come out to everything because we're so busy that she can't. But she came out and she let me bring a partner because again with the severity she just knew and I think I was younger. I was probably only 25 or 26. um And I just remember getting back to the office and like we're lucky all of our evidence is digitalized. So like we put it into a computer system to track it and its chain of custody. So I remember like sitting and like typing and like putting it in the computer system and just like looking over at my partner and I'm like, I don't think I'm okay. And she's like, yeah, I don't think I am either. And like, luckily, again, I had a great supervisor. So she like pulled us aside like after we were done with everything and was like, are you okay? And I'm like, no, I don't think I am. And I remember just like crying. Like it was, so that was the hardest for me. I'm really close with my mom. So I like called my mom. Obviously, I think that's the one thing crime scene people, and I think first responders in general, we don't like to put that burden on our family. So like I didn't tell her the gory details of everything, but I did say like, yeah, I had a child fatality and I'm not okay. Just being able to say those words were really good. I'm lucky now, like I said, my husband's a detective, so he's come to me a couple times with some of his scenes because he previously worked in homicide. Um, yeah, there's just some that like definitely do stick with you a little bit more. And it's just good to talk to people. Like I said, you can't always bring it home if your spouse or your family isn't in the field. So definitely like I lean on my coworkers a lot. They're kind of like family. I mean, there's some weeks where if I'm held over on a crime scene, I see my coworkers a little bit more than I see my husband. So I really lean on my coworkers. Um, but yeah, some of the gnarliest things I've personally seen are car accidents, speed related, alcohol related. Um, yeah, those are probably my gnarliest crime scenes are traffic accidents. But yeah, I've just gotten good at kind of like I said, coping with it. Our literal saying was, yeah, if you don't laugh, you'll cry, and we would try and just find humors in different part of our day to keep us going.
Hmm. So let me ask this then. You've seen a lot of it. If you ever have a new person that's with you and you kind of know you or you have a feeling or you get the call and you're like, okay, this is probably going to be pretty nasty, and you have a new person with you, are you like like how does that conversation go? You said because you're teaching more. So how does that go for you? Are you warning them or like how because you don't want to I feel like you don't want to make it worse for them before they get there.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you don't want to have it be a complete just like shock.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you don't know because radios have been hacked before, like police radios have been hacked. So we don't always put a lot of information over the radio. So that's why I said sometimes they'll call us.
Yeah.
Um, Luckily, at my new agency, we haven't had anything. It's jurisdiction problems. So my jurisdiction does not handle homicides. So I've been very lucky that since I've started teaching, I haven't had to have that conversation. But yeah, my old agency, if I knew I was going somewhere where there was a dead body, I would talk to my trainee and be like, hey, I know you've only been with me for a week. Have you had something like this? Whether it be like an overdose or a natural, because you know there's two different kinds of dead bodies: a homicide, which somebody caused that, or a natural, which can be an overdose or a suicide. Um, and they are two very different. Like, kind of go into it differently. Like one, you're trying to find somebody that caused that, and the other, you're like, oh no, this was whether it's drug like an overdose. You're trying to find the drugs on scene. So yeah, I would always like just talk with them like, hey, have you had any naturals yet? Have you seen any bodies yet? Um, and then it just depends on what stage they are in their training. If they're in the part where they're supposed to be doing the photography and they haven't had any dead bodies yet and they are nervous or not feeling comfortable, I will step in and just be like, hey, you haven't done this before. If you want, I can do it. And I can talk you through what I'm doing so that the next time you have this type of case, you know what to do. Um, I kind of go into it the same way I do like with detectives. Very open communication. Like, what do you feel comfortable doing? Like, yes, you're supposed to be taking over, but if you don't feel comfortable, it's not helpful for me or you. Um, I am very open with that conversation. Or like if they are gonna do it, like ask me questions. If you're about to do something and you're like, ooh, I don't know if that's right, just stop and ask me. I would rather answer it than you do it wrong and then be like, how do I fix this? Because I might not be able to help you fix it, but I can help you answer it ahead of time. So yeah, and it's harder with new people too because you don't know their personalities. Like you don't know their like ticks, like if they're nervous or if they're getting uncomfortable. So you just kind of have to like really talk. Is my best advice. Really ask them during the whole process. How are you doing? Do you need me to help out? What do you want from me? Is there anything I can do to make this easier for you? Um, and that's why I think also I do recommend internships or ride alongs because there are some people that are like, oh yeah, CSI, so cool, want to do that. And then they find out the types of crime scenes that, crime scene people do. And they see like a gunshot victim with blood, or they see somebody that was hit in the head and there's like brain matter. And they're like, oh yeah, this is not the job for me. So that's why internships or ride-alongs are kind of nice because you kind of get to like get your toes wet a little bit and kind of see like, could I deal with these types of things instead of moving halfway across the country, going through a training program, starting it and being like, oh crap, this is not for me.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I always wonder with people who are in the military or first responders or people who work with crimes and stuff, like it always gets touchy when you say like, "Oh, you ever seen a dead body to somebody?" or something like that. But I guess where I'm going with that is there's lots of videos now of these crimes actually happening that are just on Twitter or what or like
Oh yeah,
on
it's
or
crazy.
whatever. And it's super wacky because that sort of stuff was never in like you could never before just go be
Yep.
like, hey, I want to see somebody get shot, and like you can go look
Yep.
at that now, or even like the Iraq War, like the whole thing is on YouTube if you go look. There's like comedians
Right.
have bits about it and stuff. And I feel like it's um I don't know, like you see the body bags in TV shows or whatever, or you see kind of the gross stuff in TV, and you're like, okay, if I saw that in real life, like that's what it would look like. And then it never actually looks like that because on TV it's just an actor, and then you see a video. Like there was a video that popped up on my Twitter of some guy they got in like a shoving match, and the guy turned to run and he tripped, and then the other guy stabbed him, and you see him just like that's it, and like he dies there, and it's weird, it's surreal almost.
It is.
And I don't really know. I don't really have a question, I guess, but I guess what are your thoughts on that and just it just existing in everyone's like face now? Like it's not hard to find. Like I
It
wasn't even
is.
looking for it. It just was on my feed and I was like, I don't really like that that's on my feed. Like I'm not generally a squeamish person. Um, but it's just there now and like if kids and stuff are on Twitter and like all this stuff, it's like it just
Yeah.
seems strange. I don't know if you like I don't know if you have thought about it or have specific thoughts as somebody who sees these things often.
I think my first reaction is it's sad. Um, Everyone's first reaction when like problems or chaos are happening is to quickly pull out their phone and record it. Like that to me is just very sad. Um, and especially like I've been on crime scenes where families show up and they are so upset. And I couldn't imagine if like that was my family member and it just popped up on somebody's for you page. Like that's got to be devastating. Yeah, I think that's my biggest thought is it's kind of sad. Um, yeah, because before I had started this job, I mean, 10 years ago, 2013, you couldn't really find things like that. Like my first dead body was on a scene. I had had a great grandfather that passed away, and at calling hours, I saw him in his casket. But prior to that, like it
I
was
mean,
at work.
that's not even the same though. Like,
Right. It was at work was my first like actual dead body. And to think now that yeah, you could probably just Google it's a person getting stabbed, person getting shot, and it just videos just popped up. Like I think as a family member, I would just be so heartbroken. Like and to see all the views and like people are mean like the comments that like people put out on the internet like the keyboard warriors I could just yeah I could never. I'm very selective on what I even put on social media. I mean you my social media you have no clue where I work, but I always think of that too. Like would my job be proud of something that I posted, like that I commented on? Like, would they be proud to say, hey, this person works for me? Or would they be like, we need to fire this person? Or even like my parents. Would my parents be proud of me? Like, I think I have very high regard for what my parents think of me and I want to make them proud. So I couldn't imagine posting a video like that or just how easy it is to access those now.
Yeah, I was worried about what I was posting on the internet, and then I have 130 episodes of me talking for an hour plus. So, there's that too. No, that makes total sense. Yeah, it's just something that actually popped up 2 days ago, and I was like, I should probably ask Becca about this because
Yeah, it's so
it
like
just is
easily accessible now. It's crazy.
like even George Floyd, that video was out
Yeah.
that like that, and some of them is and the other thing that's really strange about it is somebody could video an altercation and like cut off the first half and then post the second half, and then everybody then it's the court of public opinion.
It's
Um,
very
a-
subjective.
yeah, and that gets weird too when, like, for example, I don't know if you've ever had this, but if you've ever had a case where a video of it went nuts on the internet and that's not actually what happened, and like, have you had that?
Not really a video, but like there's been times where like my new office, we have a TV in our office. So like I'll come back from a case and I'll start like uploading my photos and the news will be on and they'll start like spewing out the facts and I'll be like, that is not what happened. So luckily it's just like the news just not catching the whole thing. I've been lucky that I haven't had any actual videos go viral. But yeah, that
If
like
you did, how would you deal? Like, if you had a situation where a video went viral and everybody was saying one thing, and then, like, are you part of the, like, are you ever in court when that happens, or like how would you deal with, well, how, okay, well, how would you do, are you ever in court, one, and two, how do you deal with being in court, and then three, do you guys have you guys talked about that as like as an agency, like, if this happens, this is how we're going to deal with XYZ things? Because then, like, for example, you got people outside the courthouse yelling and all this other stuff, and like, is that something that you guys have talked about?
yeah, so I have been to court. I work in DC, so court's huge. Again, lucky I haven't had any of my like big cases go where there's been like media outside. Um, every agency's different, but I know like my agency, we have a social media policy. So it says like you can't talk about any of your active cases. You can't like post negatively about the agency. So yeah, very specifically, if I have an active case, I cannot post about it. So to see,
You cannot, but if
yeah,
you're going into court and you got people outside that are, they're wrong, or that they don't know anything, you have to
uh,
keep your mouth shut and go
yeah,
right into court. But I guess how, I don't know, it just seems like that would be out.
it's hard.
I'm the type of person that would yell at them like, you are wrong.
Oh yeah. I mean, you've seen me on the soccer field. I'm like, no, this
Yeah.
is not correct. You have to just stay quiet because unfortunately, like if you are going to court, anytime you're in the public eye, that can be used against you in court.
Yeah.
Um, and literally the defense is looking at anything to discredit you, whether it's relevant to the case or not. They want to discredit you to like just put any doubt in the juror's mind and prove their person innocent. So something as simple as you like being recorded walking in and out of the courtroom being like, you guys don't know what the hell you're talking about. It just puts your character into question and they're like, oh, you couldn't control yourself for 3 seconds walking out of the courtroom. So yeah, unfortunately you like really have to like mind your attitude and your presence and kind of keep a poker face and it's very hard.
Yeah. Have you
Yeah,
had to
I've
testify?
been lucky. Have I ever testified? Yeah,
Hmm.
I've got like 3 trials coming up in the next like month.
How does that go? You've got lawyers that are trying to paint a certain picture of various things, and I know, probably for you, maybe this, I'm speculating, but for you, maybe it's a little bit easier because you are looking strictly at like what you photographed and what you saw. And so it's easier for you to kind of just say, nope, this is what I saw. And then it might be harder for them to lead. But how do you deal with the questions that kind of are leading, or the, I don't know, I hate, well, I'll call them lawyery questions. But like, how
Yeah.
do you deal with that?
So I would say like my biggest misconception when it came to court is I didn't really know what to expect. But what I learned very quickly is you can only be in there, like in the courtroom for your part. So like I can't listen to the detectives testify. I can't listen to the officers. I can't watch videos that don't pertain to me because that will could potentially taint or twist my testimony. So I can only be present for the things that I did. And yeah, when it comes to like me versus an officer or detective, I feel like I definitely have it easier. Like my husband, he's been in to testify for like an hour, 2, 3 hours straight, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what are they asking you? But yeah, to me, what did you do on this day? I did photographs, DNA, and fingerprints. Um, Luckily, before I testify at all, I always do like a witness conference with the attorney. So I kind of know the case and remember and get to look at my photos and everything. If you have a good attorney, they get the rebuttal, so they can like if the defense asks you like you called it like a lawyery question and it didn't like come off that great, usually we have pretty good attorneys that they'll like redirect and they'll be like, so when you said this, is that what you meant or did you mean this? So they can like
Mm,
help clarify like a lawyery question that didn't come out that well. But yeah, the same thing like there. You kind of got to keep a poker face. You don't want the defense to know like they're flustering you. Just kind of stick to your question. And if you know your job, being in forensics, like you're good. Like
yeah.
ours is very about like what we did. So it's hard to catch me in anything because I'm like I do the same thing on every crime scene. I do photos, I do DNA, I do fingerprints. So for me, it's just like repetition and just continuing to talk about the thing.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
officers and detectives have it a lot worse. Like being the first responder or like doing the interviews of like witnesses or suspects. Like, whew, I wouldn't want to get questioned on that.
No, that seems yeah, that seems yeah, a little bit too much. I don't know. Sometimes you see testimony or that's super funny, like the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial, and you
Yeah,
watch like Johnny Depp is like, this is hilarious because the lawyers are asking dumb questions, and
yeah,
I don't even know. But I would guess for crime, for criminal court, it's a little bit less funny.
yeah, yeah. More serious.
Yeah. Um, well, we've been chatting for over an hour, so and I know you've got your event to go to. So do you have any last nickels before we get you out of here?
No, just like I said, if I can inspire one person to get into this field, I love talking about it. It's fun. Science is fun. Fingerprints are fun. Yeah, I mean, the show, like I said, is the thing that inspired me. So it's kind of got me in the door. But yeah, it's very different than TV. We do not find murderers in 1 hour.
That's yeah, you would that would be a pretty successful that would be a pretty big win.
Yeah,
Find them in 1 hour, go through an entire trial, 1 hour conviction, jail time, all of it.
yeah.
Must be nice for the TV people.
Right. Or
Uh,
like walking around, like the biggest funny for us, we always joke about is CSI Miami. They're in their like business casual and high heels. I'm like, I would never wear high heels to a crime scene. Can you imagine high heels and blood? That's such a safety hazard.
yeah, it's not a good look. I never understood that. It's like I feel like I'd be wearing sneakers all the time.
Yeah, I have black work boots, these horrendous BDU pants with all these pockets and a polo. That's my uniform. And if I get it dirty, I don't care because it's not mine.
Do detectives wear suits every day? Is that a real thing?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
It can be a little bit more casual, like the main you gotta wear a suit or homicide detectives. But my husband, like I said, just switched units, so he's a little bit more casual. They definitely have to wear suits to court. But yeah,
well,
just
yeah,
you
but
want to kind of look professional and stand out from like the officers. So they'll definitely be in like a collared shirt, nice pants. Yeah, like homicide detectives, they have to wear like nice shoes. And like there has been blood. They've accidentally stepped in or like a fluid has squirted. I feel bad because they pay good money for those clothes.
Yeah, that's nuts. I
Yeah,
feel like that's unfair. I don't know.
yeah,
In Bones, I noticed that Booth always wears Vans, black Vans. I think that's an acting thing and not a team. But I was like, that's good,
yeah.
good job, dude. All right. On that note, we'll get you out of here. I appreciate your time. And can I send if people have questions, can I send them to you?
Yeah,
Cool. So I'll do that. And then
yeah. I can even give you like my email too if that's the one I
sure.
gave you for the podcast was like
Yeah,
my
yeah.
spammy
Well,
one, but I do have a professional one people can
yeah,
contact.
we'll do it offline. I don't want to spam your email to the world. Normally these outros go a little smoother. So I guess we'll just end it here. We'll see everybody next time. Peace.